moment of silence. Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Am I coming through the mic, through the speakers?
I don't think so.
Pull it. You have to be real close.
Testing. Okay, I got it. Okay, can I hear a motion that we adopt the agenda?
I make that motion.
And I second it.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
And the ayes have it. Is there any, the new business that we have is the presentation of the fiscal year 23-24 annual comprehensive financial review. Fran, may I turn it over to you for that?
Certainly, and thank you all for having us and giving us the honor to perform the audit for the town of Montreat. I have with me today, you may have already met Chase Purrington. He's a member of our audit team this year, and he'll be able to answer any of your questions. I'm just kidding. I told him he wouldn't have to answer any questions. But let me go ahead and share the screen. I want to make sure that everyone has a copy or an available copy of the audit.
Hey, Fran,
Yeah,
can we pause just for a second so we can move our chairs to the other side of the table and see you?
sure.
Do you have them also? Do you have their photos on there?
Thank you.
All right. So, again, thank you for having us. I believe we'll make the deadline this year, even given some of the circumstances that we've had to overcome in the past few weeks, and I certainly do hope everyone is on the road to recovery. I'll start with our opinion on the financial statements. We have issued an unmodified opinion. It means we say the accompanying financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects. The respective financial position of the governmental activities, business type activities, and each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund balance of the town of Montreat. That is always good news. I'll move on to the next section of the audit, which is the MD&A, and that is just as it sounds. It's management's discussion and analysis. So this is management's chance to boast on the town, and what I will note is that these financial highlights are, by and large, very positive. The town's net position exceeded its liabilities and deferred inflows by $9 million. The total net position also increased by $424,000. The close of the fiscal year, the governmental funds reported an ending fund balance of $2.2 million, which was a net increase of $280,000. The debt decreased this year by $230,000, which was about a 12.5 or 12.8% decrease, and a good portion of that was because of the planned principal payments. And at any point, please interject if you have any questions on anything.
Fran, I do have a question on
Sure.
the fourth bulleted point. At the end of the current fiscal year, the unassigned fund balance was $1.23 million. But if you subtract the $821,665 above from the overall fund balance of 2.2, you end up with 1.392 million. What's
Okay.
the difference between those two numbers?
Right, we'll say this bullet point is just for the general fund. This bullet point is for all of the governmental funds, which also includes some of the special revenue funds, the ARPA and the lawn care, and some of the other funds that are reported as governmental funds.
Okay.
Okay? Good observation. The next part of the MD&A is the summarized financial information for the town. Here is the only place that you can see side by side the comparative financial statements. So here we see the 23 compared to 24, and what you'll note here, I have a little tick mark here that the current and other assets increased by $361,000, and that is from 23 to 24. And here again is the reference to total net position of the town of $9 million, an increase of the $424,000 from 23 to 24. We'll go on to some of the more significant amounts that you'll find on the financial statements. That is capital assets, net of depreciation. Excuse me. Capital assets in total actually decreased this year, and that is a result of recording the depreciation. As I mentioned, the long-term debt also decreased, and the only one that the town kind of has any control over is the installment purchases, and this is due to the payments of principal on the long-term debt. These other items, the pension-related debt for ledgers and Leosa, and are really an actuarial calculation that is determined using some of the information provided in the state audit of the retirement plan. So this is generally just a calculation.
Fran, another question. It's Tom here. Back 2 pages on page 10 of the audit, page 22 of the PDF. Under the second paragraph below the schedule, it says management believes that healthy investment of the town hall will result in additional revenues. Could you explain what you mean by that term, healthy investment?
I just believe that means continuing to use the resources of the town in a positive manner.
You're not referring to our fund
the investment
balance
portfolio.
investments.
No, it's not necessarily referring to the investment portfolio.
Thanks.
Okay. Go to some of the budget highlights for next year. Next year, in fiscal year 2025, I guess the year we're actually living in now, the expenditures in the general fund are expected to increase about 10%, and that's just an increase related to the overall increase of doing business. The water fund revenues will increase about 2%, and the water fund expenditures are expected to decrease about $13,000 or 3% from the actual expenditures for 2024. Of course, you all know this. You passed the budget, right, Council? Okay, so now we'll go into the main financial statements. We'll start again with the statement of net position, and this is a little more detailed than the one that we saw previously where the summarized information was, and of course this is only a single year presentation, but here you can see what makes up the net position of the town. This is the general fund and the water fund. Well, not, I misspoke. It's not the general fund, it's the governmental activities, which also includes some of the special revenue funds. Then we'll move to the statement of activities. Go ahead.
Before you leave the balance sheet there, I have a question,
Yeah.
Fran. This is Philip Arnold, the Vice Chair of the Audit Committee.
Yes.
If I go way back to 2020, there was a line item in the balance sheet which was other receivables. At that year, it was only $17,000. By last year, it had grown to $609,000. That category, that line has now vanished in 24 in this new report. What were those other receivables in 23, and where have they gone in 24?
I believe that that was the money that was due back from BB&T or Truist for the escheated monies, and those have been received now in this year.
Could you explain that again, please?
Last year, there was some funds that BB&T had escheated from the town. Excuse me, I'm gonna kick the dog out real quick. I usually have a noise canceling function in Teams, but I don't know how to use it in Zoom. Because there were some inactivities in some of the bank accounts, Truist escheated some of the money of the town and sent it to the state treasurer. And it was a process to try to get that money back. And I believe that that's what those receivables related to. And that those funds have been returned now to the town.
So those funds were recovered, and did they then show up in this year's report in cash and cash equivalents?
Yes.
Okay, which is more liquid than they were up at that point.
Yes.
Okay. I would ask, that term, other receivables, does still show up on the cash flow statement on page 22 of the water fund. Is that significant? You haven't gotten to that yet, but...
Well, I'll get there. I'll go ahead while we're talking about it. This is the amount of the escheated funds that were recovered last year. This $158,000 was the amount of cash in the water funds accounts that was recovered.
But there is a number, I don't have it in front of me, for other receivables in the water fund in this year's statement.
At
At the bottom of page 22, an increase shows up as an increase in other receivables.
Yes, and what this is a reconciliation of the operating loss that is reported on the previous statement to the cash that was provided by the operating activities. And this $158,000 right here, highlighted there, it represents the amount that in 2023 was in other receivables for the water fund. And this year it was collected, so the other receivables decreased, which increased cash by $158,000.
Good, okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
You're welcome. We'll continue on with some of the other detailed financial statements. This is the statement of activities for the town. This reports the expenses first for the primary governmental activities and the water fund, and then the program revenues, so the revenues related to operations and charges. And as you can see, that those all generate a negative amount. So expenses exceed the revenues.
Where's the restroom? Go around where that white building is, left at it, just hug the side, it'll be on the left.
Be there in a few minutes. Commissioner Blake, if you wouldn't mind muting your microphone, please.
And so what happens is that we come down and talk about the taxes and other revenues that come in to create a positive change in net position, specifically for the governmental activities. And we'll note that the business activities, or the water fund, continues to operate year to year with expenses exceeding revenues. But let's go back to that statement of cash flows for the water fund that we talk about. The cash provided by operating activities in the water fund is actually $236,000. What is really driving the operating loss in the water fund is this depreciation number. So, and obviously that's a non-cash item, and so it's not necessarily reflective of the day-to-day success of the operations of the water fund.
So it's fair to say that with the exception of the depreciation, our water enterprise is not in debt each year, does not have an operating loss each year.
Yes.
Because the water operations expenses were 346 and
Right.
income was 414.
Correct.
It's good to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But it does mean that we are not collecting enough from our overall income from the water fund to potentially ultimately pay for the replacement
That's right.
of the assets we're depreciating.
So that's not funded to depreciation is what you're saying.
Correct. Okay. Go back up just a little bit and we'll touch on the budget to actual numbers for now this is just the general fund. And what we see is that revenues were exceeded the budget by $194,000, and total expenditures were under budget by $187,000, which with the little sale of capital assets and a transfer in from the water fund, the general fund's fund balance increased by $394,000. Okay. And again, here's the water fund statement as standalone, and the cash flow portion of that, which really I think kind of tells the story, is that the cash flows from the water fund is actually positive. Okay. And then after the main financial statements, we come to the notes. And note 1 is a summary of the significant accounting policies of the town. These are all policies that are followed by the majority, if not all, of the local governments in North Carolina. And this is where you would go to find out how, what the town considers revenue for taxes if they are collected within 90 days of year end, and such things as that. We'll get to note 2 here, the stewardship, and we'll note that since we're going to be able to hopefully issue the report and upload today, that there will be no instances of non-compliance or stewardship or accountability violations for this year, as far as the financial reporting goes. Note 3 is where you get to the details of what makes up all of those line items in the financial statements, and some of the other things like the FDIC analysis, the town uses the pooling method, and so there were no uninsured cash balances at year end. The only items that are considered investments would be what is on deposit with the North Carolina Capital Management Trust Fund, and that's just about $15,000, about $7,500 per fund. This is an allowance for doubtful accounts that is recorded in the water fund. The general fund, or the for taxes, there is no allowance recorded for those because management believes that all of the taxes will be collected. And we'll get to that schedule here later. Here's a nice detail of what makes up your capital assets for the governmental activities, and then the business type activities. And one thing that you will see here, and we'll talk about that with a report that's going to be uploaded also with the audit to the local government commission, is that the net capital assets the depreciable balance, the balance of the depreciable assets is $841,000. I'll get these numbers correct. I can read them. $870,000, and of as a percentage of the assets being depreciated, that leaves about 29%. And so there is actually a finding related to that in the data input workbook, which we summarize the information for the LGC. And so to go back to the point about depreciation, is that if this number is less than 50%, it could be an indication that the system is aging and could need some major repairs or replacements.
Less than 50% of the total accumulated.
So
total
this
capital
50% of this number.
Wow.
So right now it's 29%. So it's the system is 70% depreciated. Okay, I'll go through and read a little bit more about the details of the funds. Notes 4 and 5 state that first, the town receives federal and state grants, and although it has never happened, there's a possibility that the town could have to repay some of those grants. And then we have a very brief subsequent event note about the damage from Hurricane Helene. We get to some of the required supplementary information. So this is information that carries on. Once we get to 10 years, we won't keep adding columns, but this is so you can see the differences from year to year in the proportionate share of the pension liability. And so this is again based on some actuarial calculations with numbers provided by the state treasurer. And so it's there's really no consistency to that from year to year. This is a little bit more consistent, where the percentage of covered payroll compared to the town's contribution, it's actually increasing steadily throughout the years, which means that I guess more folks are eligible for the pension. This is the same information related to the local law enforcement officer special separation allowance. Again, the last So you can see the trend of how that's going and what the pension liability is. You can see it from a high in 2021 of 196,000 down to this year of 82,000.
And why is that decrease?
It's an actuarial calculation, and it's using a discount rate that here, I believe, if the discount rate is lower, the liability amount is higher, and so we have higher interest rates here than we did here.
And it's based on ages of police officers?
It is somewhat based on the ages of the police officers and some other mortality information. These numbers are provided to the town from an actuary, Kavanaugh McDonough actually prepares this report for most towns in North Carolina.
Thanks.
And then we have a little more detail on the general fund statement. So this is a further breakdown of what was provided on page 1, and it also compares the budget to actual. So you can see a little bit in more detail which specific line items and how they fared with the budget. Same with the expenditures. And then we have the water fund budget to actual. And one thing I will point out is that although overall total expenditures were not over budget for the water fund, the operating expenditures were over what was originally budgeted in the water fund. So, and I would guess, you know, that's some unexpected repairs and some other unexpected operating expenses that came along. But again, not over budget in total. And I want to point out again that this depreciation number here is what is driving this negative change in net position. To taxes receivable. For the 23-24 year, there was $1,500 left uncollected from this year's levy, and a total of $2,400 that has not been collected, and there's no allowance for these, as management believes that these should be collected. And here's an analysis of the net levy, and what this shows us is of the 2023-24 levy, that 99.88% of that has been collected. And then following this, we have the statistical section. This is the section that sets the town of Montreat apart from many other local governments. This is what part of what makes this an annual comprehensive financial report as opposed to just an annual financial statement. And so this section gives the reader some details about the trends in the town and some of the demographic information for the town. Breakdown of the expenditures, breakdown of revenues by source, the tax levy by year and how that has increased, and the percentage of collection, and you know how the tax rate has changed or not changed, the assessed value, and the one thing, the debt limit. Towns in North Carolina are allowed 8% of their assessed property value, which would mean the town could borrow up to $23 million, and the outstanding debt is well below that, with a debt margin of $23.2 million remaining. Okay. Any more questions on that?
I just have a couple comments for our staff.
Sure.
I know that we provide you with this statistical information, and I noticed that on this particular schedule that you've got up right now, largest taxpayers, things have not changed, but I know that we've had changes over the last 2 years in the, some of the highest valued homes being changed, and we have not had a change there. So
Yeah, there's a little switch from here to here.
But the top
Of course,
10 haven't
Member Street
changed.
Association remains, and the values have changed.
okay, and the other one is if you go to the last schedule,
The very last one,
yeah.
okay?
The employees, I think that there's an error in that. It says 9 full-time, and my count with 4 police, 5 public works, and 3 admin full-time, that's 12.
Okay,
Fran, this is Philip Arnold. May I ask 2 questions about your opinion? First, there was the last sentence of that whole opinion has never been on your opinion, which said that this information is intended solely for the information and use of the members of the Board of Commissioners and management, and is not intended to be and should not be used by anyone other than those specified parties. Does that mean Angie cannot hand out reports to the public that want to come in?
which paragraph?
It's the very last sentence of your opinion. Page 3, bottom of the page.
It is a good question.
Wait a minute. Well,
Are you maybe looking at the report,
maybe, okay. Maybe
the
so.
board?
Okay.
That might be. This is an internal report, right here.
Yeah,
This
right.
is not necessarily the opinion. Obviously, the financial statements are public information. This
Okay.
is an internal use.
Then why is it there?
I'm sorry? I didn't hear that question.
They're asking, Fran, this is Savannah Parrish, the town manager. They're asking the restriction on use paragraph. They're asking why it's there. I think it's causing some confusion. And I'll just
Okay.
say,
Sure, I'll go ahead
it's
and address.
it's all public record. As soon as this, was emailed to town staff, all of this entire packet is public record.
Okay. Thank you. And my other question, on page 4, I guess maybe behind this report, was a statement, corrected audit differences, about 20.
I haven't gotten to this letter yet, but if there are no other questions
Oh,
on
I'm
the financial
sorry.
statements, I'll go ahead and cover it. This is a separate communication that is not included with the audit report, but it is a required communication from us to the board and the mayor each year. And in it, we go over some of the sort of non-qualitative points of the audit. And one thing that we noted is that there were no new accounting policies adopted this year, and that there were no transactions entered into that had lack of authoritative guidance, and that all significant transactions have been recognized in the financial statements in the proper period. Here we go to talk about the estimates, and of course depreciation is an estimate. It's based on the estimated useful life of assets over straight line, but sometimes things break or get destroyed otherwise. So that's an estimate. The allowance for doubtful accounts is an estimate based on what management believes the collectability is of the outstanding receivables. And of course, we've talked a couple of times about the estimate for the pension costs. These are actuarial assumptions related to inflation, salary increase, interest rates, and other things, and those are provided by actuaries. We evaluated the methods and assumptions for the estimates and they appear reasonable. We believe the financial statement disclosures are neutral, consistent, and clear. We encountered no significant difficulties in dealing with management during the audit. Dealing with the weather was a different story. There was one small uncorrected misstatement in the financial statements, and it had no it had no income effect. It was just a reclassification from one type of expense to another. Attachment A is a list of the journal entries that were prepared during the audit, and we'll go over those. There were no disagreements that arose during the course of the audit, and this is something that we usually put at the bottom of each of these types of communications. Don't think that you obviously can make it public information, but I don't believe that it has to be public information. Now, these are the journal entries, and I've given these to Rachel and Savannah, and they've already begun posting these. Most of these journal entries, the ones that say like adjust debt service payments and LEOSA and ledgers and compensated absences, depreciation, all of these are what we call the GASB adjustments, and those, and this is true for most of our governmental units, these adjustments are not tracked necessarily internally by the government because they are really just posted for the financial statement presentation, like the depreciation and the pension liabilities and everything like that. What is generally reported on a day-to-day basis for the governments are the actual, the current economic focus, which is the day-to-day cash inflows and cash outflows in the general fund and the water fund. So the vast majority of these journal entries are those that we call the GASB adjustments.
And so they will not be posted to the books internally. Is that what you're saying?
Actually, this year, I believe that Savannah and Rachel have made a decision to start a GASB fund and to go ahead and record these entries. But these entries and this fund will have no bearing or very little bearing on what you would see in your reports related to the water fund and the general fund. These are really, the GASB adjustments really only affect 2 pages of your financial statements.
Fran, are we to a point where you can wrap up so I can get a recommendation from the audit committee? I've got a quorum here for about 5 more minutes, and I need to get this wrapped up, recommended by them, and let the commissioners take a vote.
And would you hang on afterward, Fran, just for a couple quick questions?
Sure. Yeah, we'll hang around.
All right, Fran, thank you very much. I'd also like
You're
to
welcome.
thank the town employees for working with Carter and getting this audit out, because it looks like we're going to meet our deadlines. It was a clean audit, and you're certainly to be congratulated for that. That means a couple of things. One is it gives us reasonable assurance that the financial information in this document is fairly presented. It also means that there were no adverse findings in the audit, and all of those things are new. So thank you. Are there any other discussion? Do I hear a motion that we accept the audit and recommend it to the Board of Commissioners for their adoption?
With great praise for our CFO and for the CPAs, I make a motion that we, as the audit committee, accept this audit report for June 30th, 2024.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, it's up to you.
Commissioners, you have heard the audit report and the recommendation from the audit committee. Do I have a motion to adopt the audit as presented?
I move to adopt the audit as presented.
Do I have a second?
A second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion and/or questions? All those in favor of the audit presentation signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Ayes carry. Audit is adopted.
Fran, my question was going to be, in your opinion, will the LGC have any concerns about the information in the audit, particularly about the depreciation area?
That is the only area of concern that has been indicated in the data input workbook that we also upload to them. And again, it's the relative age of the water infrastructure. And so that will require a written response. This is actually a repeat finding, so it was also addressed last year. And I don't know that anything has changed as far as what the response will be. 2023 was the first year this calculation was included in the data input workbooks. And I can tell you that most of the municipalities and other units around here are receiving similar findings.
Thank you.
I have one more question for Fran and for Rachel. Between 23 and 24, there were 6 funds, like the Graybeard Trail Fund, that disappeared to my delight because they'd all been cleaned out. They had run their course. Now, looking forward, as we try to reconstruct this town, has there been any thought yet about how detailed the fund division will be? Will it be like every bridge and every every road, or will it be pulled into one giant
One
rebuild?
giant fund.
Really?
Yeah, we created Fund 29 called Hurricane Helene to address all of that.
Okay.
So it'll all be in there.
But Barry will have detail on each project.
Yeah. Yes.
So, although it'll all be grouped together in a big fund, we should, and correct me if I'm wrong, with relative ease, be able to go back and say, but we spent this much on paving, and we spent this much on bridges. That shouldn't be an issue, although it will be coming out of one fund.
Thank you.
More questions or concerns? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
And
So moved.
Have a motion from Commissioner Widmer, have a second from Commissioner Alexander. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned.
Audit Committee stands adjourned as well.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yes.